You're taking care of all the kids. It's not my problem." Those were the exact words my sister, Emily, spat at me as she adjusted her veil in front of the mirror of her tiny apartment on West 42nd Street in Manhattan. It was 3:17 p.m. on a Thursday, June 14th, 2024, exactly 2 hours before her wedding ceremony at the Starlight Banquet Hall in Queens, and I had just finished packing snacks and toys for 8 screaming children aged 3 to 12 who were running wild across her living room, the scent of freshly baked lemon bars from her mother's oven mixed with the faint perfume of roses she insisted on having everywhere. Made the contrast even more surreal. My entire day had been mapped down to the minute. I had spent 45 minutes untangling the stroller of my nephew Charlie, who had a meltdown over a spilled juice box, and another 20 minutes negotiating with my niece Lily, age 7, who refused to wear the pink dress Emily had bought for her the day before I had sacrificed my morning plans. I had been invited to a gallery opening at 10 a.m., a rare chance to see works by local artists I had been waiting for months to attend, but I canceled because Emily called me at 9:02 a.m. saying she needed me for a few hours. That few hours stretched into a full day, and now, as she stood there in her silk dress that cost $1,200, she uttered words that cut deeper than any knife I'd ever felt in my life, and in exactly 15 minutes, everything would change. I could feel it even as my hands trembled, holding a diaper bag full of wipes, bottles, and snacks 8 kids I had never agreed to babysit for an entire wedding, but somehow, in her mind, my lifetime of support and babysitting for family holidays and birthdays counted for nothing. Memories of past sacrifices flooded back like a tidal wave. My 30th birthday in 2013 spent cleaning up after a college graduation party because she didn't want to deal with the mess. My first week working at a new job in Boston in 2017 spent on a 7-hour drive back to Long Island to help her move into a new apartment. All the times I lent her my savings, totaling $4,562.50 over the past 12 years for weddings, travel, and emergencies, and never once mentioned it because I never wanted recognition. But this line, this simple sentence, erased all that as if my entire life's dedication was invisible. The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with perfume and sweat from the kids running around. I could hear the crinkle of wrapping paper and the squeak of wooden floors beneath frantic little feet. I felt my chest tighten as her words echoed against the walls. Her friend Claire, who had been helping her with final touches, raised her eyebrows and whispered, "Wow." She doesn't even flinch. My stomach churned as I glanced at the clock, ticked down to 3:30 p.m. I wanted to scream to anyone who would listen. You know that feeling when someone treats you as if your time and effort don't matter when you've given everything for years and years? That was me right then in that cramped apartment, smelling of lemon bars, cheap silk. In desperation, I could see the gold sequins on her shoes, reflecting the afternoon light filtering through the blinds. As if mocking me, she crossed her arms and tilted her chin slightly, a gesture I had seen before during family disagreements, where she always got her way. The kids were now clustered around me, half on the couch, half under the coffee table, shouting for juice, crackers, attention, someone to play. With them, I felt the weight of every single one pressing on me physically and emotionally, and then, as if the universe had timed it, Emily's phone rang. It was her wedding planner, reminding her about the 4 p.m. rehearsal run-through and telling her not to forget the photographer and the seating chart. I could hear her mutter, "Oh, thank God," under her breath. Oblivious to the chaos around me, I had a choice in that split second: stay silent like every other time I let things slide, pretend I was okay with this unfair expectation, or finally do something different in that 15-minute window. I would decide my entire relationship with my family, my own dignity, and the respect I deserve from that point forward. This wasn't just about babysitting. It was about recognition, about being seen, about the countless sacrifices over the years that were now thrown aside like an empty coffee cup. I clenched my jaw, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks, and the hands of the children tugged at me as if sensing my hesitation. "You're going to be fine," said my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who had come and pick up her mail, but froze seeing the chaos. She witnessed everything. The toys, the scattered juice boxes, my trembling hands, Emily's icy glare, and in that moment, I knew you ever been pushed to the absolute edge by someone who should love you unconditionally? That was me right now in 15 minutes. The story would turn on its head. If you've ever been put in a position where someone expected you to do everything while they got all the glory, comment below right now, because this isn't just a story, it's a warning. It's about taking back what's yours at about the moment when enough finally becomes enough. I remember growing up in a small row house on Maple Street in Hoboken, New Jersey. It was the kind of house where floors creaked like they had stories to tell, and the walls were plastered with faded wallpaper from the 1970s, my sister Emily. And I shared a bedroom with bunk beds that squeaked every time we moved, and a tiny window that looked out onto the street where kids played hopscotch and rode bikes past our front yard. I was 10 years old when I first realized that taking care of her wasn't optional. It was expected. My parents both working 2 jobs, each my father at the Hoboken shipyard from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m., my mother as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital 11-hour shift. 3 days a week meant someone had to watch Emily during afternoons after school and weekends. Naturally, that someone was me. I didn't mind at first. I thought it was just part of being a big sister. I remember October 12th, 1986 specifically because it was a Saturday and the air smelled like wet leaves and the faint scent of cinnamon from Mom's pie cooling on the windowsill. Emily was 6 and had a birthday party to attend at the YMCA. She was supposed to have a fun day with friends and games, but she couldn't go without supervision. So I packed her little backpack with juice boxes, 2 peanut butter sandwiches cut into triangles, and a pink teddy bear she insisted on bringing. We walked down the street together, and I held her hand tightly because she was so excited. I can still see her purple dress with tiny daisies stitched into the hem, and the way her blonde curls bounced as she ran to show me her friends. I stayed back, making sure she didn't fall or cry when she tripped on the cracked sidewalk. And she didn't even notice that I missed a chance to join my friends at the park for a Saturday soccer game. I was 9 years old, but I already learned that my schedule was flexible. My sister's happiness was not. I went through years like this, endless weekends and summers babysitting Emily during sleepovers or parties or school events. I learned to make pancakes exactly like Mom did, measuring the flour to the gram, whisking for exactly 2 minutes and 35 seconds. So they would be fluffy. I could clean the house, fold laundry, iron her school dresses, and still manage to sneak in my homework for 4th and 5th grade without complaints. I remember saving up $73.45 for my allowance at age 12 to buy her a scrapbook for Christmas because she mentioned once how much she loved keeping memories. I spent hours cutting photos and gluing little stickers and writing captions in my neatest handwriting, hoping to see her smile. She smiled and said, "Thanks. You're the best big sister ever." I can still hear it echoing in my mind today. I wasn't doing it for praise. I did it because I cared. But looking back, I realized that smile became part of a pattern of expectation. Over the years, my dedication became invisible. Emily grew used to it. She expected it. She demanded it, not out of malice, but out of habit. And my parents never stepped in to say enough. Already by the time I turned 18, I had 15 years of documented babysitting and caregiving experience for Emily alone. I had taken her to 23 school events, 14 summer camps, 7 dentist appointments, and even her first piano recital, where I spent 3 hours coaching her to practice the correct notes. I had saved receipts for $1,237.60 in gifts, food, and supplies I had personally bought over the years without asking for reimbursement. I never mentioned it. I never kept score because I didn't think life worked like that. I thought family was supposed to be give and take. But what I didn't realize was that the take part would eventually tip entirely onto me. My friends started noticing too. "Wilson, you're always doing stuff for Emily. When do you do something for yourself?" Asked Sarah one afternoon at the diner on Washington Street. While we shared a slice of cherry pie and a cup of black coffee, I just shrugged. "I like helping her," I said, but deep down I knew I hadn't had a Saturday to myself in months. It was 2009, and I had just started working at the local library on 3rd Avenue in Hoboken. I worked 40 hours a week and still came home to do homework for Emily or help her with college applications. I remember staying up until 2:45 a.m. on October 18th because she had a last-minute essay due the next morning. I typed out on her laptop in the dim glow of my desk lamp with the hum of the radiator, keeping me company. I learned patience and endurance, but I also learned invisibility. You become invisible when everyone counts on you to be there, but no one ever thanks you or even notices. You get used to the scent of lemon-scented floor cleaner mixed with the smell of baby powder and crayons. You hear the squeak of shoes on linoleum floors and a constant murmur of voices asking for more help. You see the small victories in her eyes and smile anyway because it's expected. You sacrifice your morning, your nights, your social life, your dreams, and people barely blinked. The pattern continued for decades, and I began to feel the creeping resentment. I felt it in subtle ways, the tightening in my chest, the backaches from lifting her furniture when she moved apartments, the restless nights when I worried if she would manage her own bills. My dedication had become my identity, and my burden at the same time, and now standing in that tiny apartment on West 42nd Street looking at her silk dress and her smug expression, I could trace the roots of this day. Back 35 years, it wasn't just about the wedding, it was a culmination of decades of unnoticed devotion. I felt my hands tighten around a diaper bag and toys as I realized the enormity of the situation: 8 children, a wedding in less than 2 hours, and Emily acting as if I had no choice but to sacrifice yet again. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, just wait until they see what happens next. And for those of you watching who have ever felt invisible because of family, obligations, hold on, because the story is just beginning, and what comes next might just shock you. By the time I was 25, I had lost count of the weekends I sacrificed for Emily's convenience. I had flown from Boston to New York 8 times in a single year just to help her move apartments, each time lugging boxes labeled fragile. With her name in black marker, I spent $1,432.17 of my own savings on packing materials, takeout dinners for the movers, and gas money because she claimed she didn't have time to do it herself. I remember March 12, 2014, perfectly clear because it was snowing lightly in Hoboken and the sidewalks were slick and icy. Emily had insisted I help her assemble IKEA furniture for her new apartment on 9th Avenue. It'll only take an hour, she said at 9:15 a.m. as I adjusted my coat against a cold wind. I could see the steam rising from my coffee cup as I sighed and lugged the first bookshelf inside. I worked for nearly 3 hours sanding, assembling, and positioning furniture while she sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, occasionally saying careful. With that corner, careful with the legs and a tone that implied I was incompetent. When the bookshelf wobbled slightly, she sighed and said, I guess we'll just leave it like that. It's fine. As if my effort didn't matter, I could hear the faint hum of the radiator and the crunch of snow under my boots outside the window. I stayed focused anyway. I had always done that. I had always believed in putting family first, even when it cost me nights of sleep, social events, or money I had invested my entire life into her happiness, from birthdays to holidays to emergency babysitting at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday because she had a last-minute work thing. I had saved receipts and kept a mental ledger of every dollar spent, $4,562.50 over 12 years on gifts, snacks, decorations, and emergencies. I had lent her money for college applications, car repairs, and medical bills. Without a word of complaint, I justified it to myself as love, as duty, as family. But by 2018, the first cracks appeared. Emily had started expecting more than I could give without acknowledging it. I remember June 2nd vividly. It was a Saturday, and she called me at 8:42 a.m. to ask if I could babysit 3 of her friends' children as well, because it would be easier if you just did it. I had a presentation at 10 a.m. for my job at the local insurance office on Park Avenue, but I canceled anyway. I could hear the kids running around the apartment in the background as she said casually, "You're always so reliable. Thanks." And I smiled through gritted teeth. Of course, I said quietly, but inside I felt a tiny spark of frustration. It was subtle at first, just a whisper in the back of my mind. I ignored it. I told myself patience is a virtue. I reminded myself of all the years I had invested in her happiness. The first time I cooked Thanksgiving dinner for her entire college group at age 22 because she had to work late at the cafe. I spent 5 hours preparing turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, and pies only to have her friends thank her instead of me. The aroma of roasted turkey, sage, and cinnamon filled the apartment, and I chopped vegetables until my hands hurt, my shoulders ached, but I smiled anyway. I remember the first time I got real recognition from someone outside the family. It was 2010, when my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson from 301 Maple Street, brought me a plate of cookies and said, "I don't know how you do it, Wilson, you're a saint." It was the first time I realized the sacrifices were visible to others, but invisible to those who mattered most. Emily's habit of taking for granted everything I did grew over the years. She became so accustomed to my presence that she assumed I would rearrange my entire life for her schedule, her parties, her whims. Her wedding, I remember a particular Sunday in 2016. She called at 7:12 a.m. asking if I could come over and help decorate her apartment for a bridal shower. At 10 a.m., I had just gotten home from a 12-hour shift at the library, and my legs were sore from carrying boxes all day. She didn't hesitate. "It'll be fun," she said cheerfully, as if ignoring my exhaustion and personal plans. I could smell the coffee brewing in her kitchen, cinnamon from the rolls she bought for the table, and the faint perfume lingering from when she opened the door. I felt my chest tighten with frustration, but I forced a smile and said, "Sure, I'll be there inside I was simmering quietly. I had noticed the pattern. Emily didn't see me as a person with needs or limits. She saw me as a tool, a resource, a guarantee of her convenience. My sacrifices were her right, not my choice, and the first time I even hinted that I needed help, she laughed. "You're overreacting," in a tone that made me shrink into myself. The sound of that laugh echoed in my head during the long subway ride home. That night, my back hurt from bending over to set up tables. My hands were raw from tape cuts and ribbon scissors. My feet throbbed from standing for hours. And yet she was home scrolling through Pinterest like it was all effortless for her. She didn't see the stack of $276.45 in craft supplies I had spent that weekend for her party. She didn't see the effort, the stress, or the years of giving without acknowledgement. And that's when I began noticing the warning signs, the subtle arrogance creeping in her tone, the impatient gestures. When I asked questions, the dismissive smirks. When I suggested an alternative, she assumed her world was mine to manage and maintain. I began keeping a mental tally not out of greed, but because my sense of fairness demanded it. 35 years of caregiving, hundreds of hours spent on her whims, thousands of dollars spent on my own money, and countless nights missed with friends or romantic interests. And yet standing in her apartment that Thursday afternoon in Manhattan on June 14th, 2024, the scent of lemon bars in the air and 8 children tugging at me, I could feel that familiar pattern taking shape again. I knew something had to give. The situation was spiraling, and I could see the first subtle signs of disrespect morph into outright entitlement. And for those of you watching who have ever sacrificed your own life for someone else's convenience, just wait, because the next part is where the real tension begins. And you'll see why sometimes family can push even the most patient person to the edge. By the time 3:45 p.m. rolled around on that Thursday afternoon in Manhattan, the apartment had descended into controlled chaos. 8 kids, ranging from 3 to 12, were running in all directions, some clutching juice boxes, others shouting for attention and toys. I had been juggling snacks, bottles, crayons, and tantrums for the past 90 minutes. Without a single break, the smell of spilled chocolate milk mixed with the faint perfume of Emily's silk dress and the lingering lemon bars from her mother's baking created a dizzying sensory storm. I could feel my shoulders tighten under the weight of the diaper bags slung across my chest and the wailing of my youngest nephew tugging at my sleeve. "Wilson," shouted Emily from the corner, adjusting her veil again, "make sure the kids are ready in 5 minutes for photos." Her tone wasn't suggestion, it was a command, as if I were some hired staff and not her lifelong sister. I had tried earlier to negotiate calmly. "Emily, I think I need a few minutes to organize the kids and finish feeding them," I said cautiously, hoping she would understand. "We don't have time for that," she snapped, her eyes narrowing as she gestured toward the clock. 3:47 p.m. Exactly. I felt my chest tighten as the kids began running into each other, my hands sticky with juice and cookie crumbs. I could hear Claire, her friend, whispering, "Wow, she's really expecting you to do all this alone," as if noticing for first time the impossible burden she was placing on me. My first attempt to impose calm was a minor negotiation with Lily, age 7, who refused to put on the pink dress Emily had chosen. "You promised me ice cream if I wore it," she said, pouting as I tied the last bow on her hair. I sighed. "Okay, let's do it quickly, then we'll get ice cream afterward. Try to maintain some." Peace, but Emily walked past and muttered under her breath, "She's slowing everything down loud enough for me to hear," and for Claire to whence the first small public humiliation arrived when one of Emily's cousins, Jamie, arrived to help set up tables and chairs. He glanced at me, caring for children on my lap simultaneously, and muttered, "Is she always like this?" I could feel my face flush red with embarrassment. The kids were now more chaotic than ever. Charlie spilled his juice on the beige carpet of the living room, and Lily tripped over a stray doll, sending both of them tumbling. "Watch it," I shouted as I scrambled to clean up the mess. Her cousin barely blinked, but Emily laughed softly from the corner. "It's fine, Wilson, you're overreacting," she said with that familiar tone that had haunted me for years. The arrogance was creeping in, and the humiliation began to sting. I tried to focus on one child at a time, taking deep breaths, counting seconds in my head. 3:53 p.m., 3:54 p.m., 3:55 p.m., I could feel the pressure mounting, and the kids were sensing it too. They began tugging at my sleeves, crying for attention, laughing and shouting over each other. The apartment echoed with chaos, and Emily seemed completely oblivious. I could hear the faint buzz of her phone alarm going off on the kitchen counter, reminding her to check photos and final seating. But she didn't glance my way at 3:56 p.m. when her friends, Megan, arrived with flowers and immediately noticed the stress on my face. "Wilson, are you okay?" she whispered, but Emily waved her off. "She's fine, don't worry about it." The dismissal stung as much as the chaos around me. I could feel my hands trembling as I wiped juice from a carpet that smelled faintly of chocolate and vinegar from the kids' spilled drinks. I was moving like a conductor orchestrating a disaster symphony, kids screaming, crayons dropping juice, spilling plates, falling, while Emily stood in her $1,200 dress, adjusting her veil, and snapping her fingers to check on time. I tried again to assert myself calmly. "Emily, I need a minute to get the kids ready. Before the photos." I said, my voice firmer this time. "Just do it quickly," she said dismissively, and turned away from me. I could feel the heat rise in my cheeks and the familiar sinking feeling of invisibility that had haunted me for decades creeping in again. This wasn't just about babysitting anymore. It was about the accumulation of every ignored effort, every unpaid debt of gratitude, every sacrifice that had never been acknowledged. I glanced toward the window, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floorboards. I could see Mrs. Thompson across the street waving from her mailbox, but she couldn't intervene. I felt utterly trapped, and the first real pangs of indignation coursed through me, as if saying enough is enough, but still I stayed calm. I picked up the crying toddler, wiped chocolate from the carpet, and helped Lily fix her dress, all while Emily chatted on the phone coordinating final wedding details. I could feel the judgment in her tone, her casual dismissals, her assumption that I would handle everything, and her complete lack of awareness of the emotional labor I was carrying. I looked around the room and noticed 3 phones recording the scene, discreetly, one on the counter from Claire, another from Megan, and a third from Jamie's phone, as if the universe was silently observing the injustice unfolding in real time. The escalating humiliation was now witnessed, recorded, and yet Emily remained entirely unaware. My back ached, my wrists were sore, my head throbbed, but I couldn't stop. The kids were still running circles around the room, and I was still expected to manage every single detail. I thought back to all the small injustices over the years, the unacknowledged babysitting, the unpaid efforts to quiet sighs when I asked for help, and I realized this was just the beginning of the public unraveling that was about to come. And for those of you watching who have ever been quietly humiliated in front of family or friends, ask yourself, what would you do if this pattern repeated itself right in front of your eyes? Wait, because things are about to get worse in the next part. By 3:58 p.m., the chaos in Emily's apartment had reached absolute peak. 8 children, now completely out of control, 4 running in circles, screaming, 2 crying loudly, and 2 clinging to my legs, demanding attention. At the same time, I was bouncing a tray of juice boxes, a diaper bag, and a half-eaten sandwich for Charlie, whose chocolate-stained hands left marks all over the beige carpet. I could hear the faint ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. 3:59 p.m. exactly. A cruel countdown to the wedding ceremony that Emily was preparing for calmly and completely oblivious to the hurricane around her. I had been on my feet for nearly 2 hours nonstop from 2:10 p.m. to 3:58 p.m. My back aching, my wrists throbbing, my shoulders tight from carrying toddlers and maneuvering furniture to keep the kids from smashing into each other. The apartment reeked of spilled chocolate milk mixed with the faint floral scent of Emily's silk dress and lingering lemon bars from her mother's baking that had gone cold. My hands were sticky. I was sweaty. I could feel every tension point in my body screaming at me, but there was no pause button, no rescue squad, just me, 8 kids, and Emily's ever-watchful eyes judging every movement. Her friend Claire was filming discreetly from the corner and whispered, "Wilson, this is insane. She's asking too much." But Emily waved her off. "She's fine. She can handle it." In a tone dripping with arrogance and entitlement, Jamie's phone recorded a video of me chasing after Lily. While carrying Charlie in my arms and dodging spilled juice on the floor, Megan had started taking pictures on her phone, capturing my flustered expressions as the children shrieked in unison. Emily, perched by the mirror, adjusting her veil for the 4th time in 15 minutes, looked at me and said, "Seriously, Wilson, can you just get the kids ready now? We don't have all day." Her words were calm but sharp, like a scalpel slicing through my patience. I tried again to reason. "Emily, I can't get them all under control in 2 minutes. Please help me calm them down." She sighed dramatically and rolled her eyes. "Wilson, you always overcomplicate everything. It's fine. Just do it." My chest tightened. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks and the familiar sting of invisibility. My decades of unacknowledged sacrifice rushing back in a wave of pure frustration. I bent down to pick up Charlie, who had dropped his sandwich on the floor. I could feel the chocolate smear on my sleeve and the damp stickiness from spilled juice, I heard the faint giggles of two younger cousins watching from the couch and whispering, "She's crazy." I glanced at Emily, and her smirk told me everything. She thought she was in control. I heard another friend whisper behind me, "Look at her, she's completely losing it." As my knees buckled slightly under the weight of the kids, and the chaos I had never felt more exposed, more humiliating than the physical exhaustion, was a total disregard for my humanity. Emily had become a master of subtle psychological domination, her voice calm, her words minimal but devastating, her gaze icy and full of expectation. I tried to keep a composed tone as I instructed Lily, "Pick up the crayons and put them in the box, please." She stomped her foot in protest and shouted no, sending a purple marker rolling across the carpet. I chased after it just as Charlie spilled his juice across the beige rug, leaving a brownish puddle spreading toward the ottoman. I could hear the faint hum of traffic outside through the window on West 42nd Street, and the clinking of silverware from the neighbor below, preparing dinner. The sound only intensified the absurdity of the moment as I simultaneously wiped juice off the floor, distracted Lily from tipping over a chair, and comforted a screaming toddler. Emily glanced at her phone again and said, "Hurry up, Wilson. They need to be ready in 5 minutes for the photos." The words felt like nails on my back, and I realized she had not only set impossible expectations, but she was now actively enjoying the spectacle of my struggle. The apex arrived when, at exactly 4 p.m., the photographer rang the doorbell. I froze in shock. Emily gave me a tiny shrug, as if to say, "See? Handle it." And the kids shrieked louder, sensing a shift in energy. The photographer, a tall man named Mark from Queens, stepped inside and immediately raised his eyebrows at the scene. "Everything okay here?" I could only nod weakly, my hands trembling as I balanced Lily, Charlie, and a juice-stained tray simultaneously. Emily smiled at the chaos, as if orchestrating a live performance. "Wilson, just get them in line for the photos," she said casually. I could feel the cameras from Claire, Megan, and Jamie capturing my flustered expression, every angle. My humiliation, now immortalized digitally, her arrogance had escalated to full-blown entitlement, and I realized this was the moment decades of being taken for granted collided with reality. I was exhausted, sticky, humiliated, and entirely visible to witnesses, yet completely ignored by the one person who had expected me to manage it all. I took a deep breath and noticed a subtle shift in my body posture. My spine straightened slightly, my jaw set firmly, and my eyes narrowed ever so slightly, as if signaling to myself that something had changed. The tension had peaked. The injustice was undeniable, and the first seeds of a plan to reclaim dignity began to form. I looked around and noticed Mrs. Thompson still peering from across the street, Claire filming quietly, Megan snapping photos, and Jamie recorded with his phone. The universe was watching every single second, and the sheer magnitude of the humiliation made it clear that the tipping point had arrived. And for anyone watching who has ever been pushed beyond patience in front of friends or family, brace yourself, because the next chapter is where everything starts to turn the corner. It was exactly 4:01 p.m. on June 14th, 2024, when something inside me clicked. I had been running around Emily's apartment for nearly 2 hours, juggling 8 children, a diaper bag, a tray of juice boxes, spilled chocolate milk, and a barrage of demands. My back ached, my wrists burned, and my heart was racing. But suddenly I felt a strange calm wash over me, as if all the chaos around me had slowed down for a fraction of a second. The apartment smelled of chocolate, spilled juice, and faint perfume from Emily's silk dress. But now, instead of feeling suffocated, I noticed every detail sharply. The crinkle of wrapping paper under Lily's feet, the squeak of Charlie's sneakers on a hardwood floor, the hum of the radiator mixing with the distant traffic on West 42nd Street. I straightened my spine for the first time all afternoon and realized I was the one everyone expected to manage everything, while Emily stood there in her $1,200 dress, phone in hand, calm and oblivious. "Wilson, seriously, we don't have all day," she said with that infuriatingly serene tone. I felt my chest tighten as the words hit me like a lightning bolt, but something inside me whispered not this time. For decades, I had allowed my sacrifices, my money, my time, and my emotional labor to be invisible. I remembered every Saturday spent cleaning, every Christmas gift purchased with my own $73.45 allowance at age 12, every 12-hour library shift missed for her convenience, every unpaid bill I covered, every frantic drive from Boston to New York, every melted chocolate bar I cleaned up after kids she brought over. It all flashed before me in vivid, Almost cinematic clarity, the subtle arrogance in her tone, the dismissive smirks, the quiet laughs at my supposed overreaction. It was all part of a pattern I had silently endured for years, and suddenly, in that cramped apartment with 8 kids screaming, juice spilled, chocolate smeared, and cameras discreetly recording everything, I felt the first spark of power. The shift started small. I stopped moving like a robot orchestrating chaos and took a moment to look around deliberately. I noticed Claire filming, Megan snapping photos, Jamie recording, Mrs. Thompson watching from across the street. My life's labor had witnesses, and now, perhaps unknowingly, an audience. I felt a flicker of satisfaction that for the first time someone outside Emily might see the absurdity, the unfairness, the sheer magnitude of what I had been forced to do. I inhaled slowly, counted 10 in my head for 02 p.m. 4:03 p.m. 4:04 p.m. My breaths long, steady, controlled. The trembling in my hands subsided slightly, and for the first time that afternoon, I felt my mind sharpen instead of fraying. I realized I could no longer allow my life, my dignity, my time to be invisible. I began to notice the power that had always been dormant inside me. Decades of responsibility, organizational skill, patience, and attention to detail had honed me into someone capable of managing any challenge with precision. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and invisible, but the skills I had cultivated under duress were my hidden advantage. I glanced at Emily adjusting her veil again and noticed the faint lines of tension around her eyes, the slight smirk that betrayed her arrogance. She thought she was in control, but in that split second, I realized she had no idea what was about to happen. I could feel the first subtle energy of assertiveness radiating from my core. My posture straightened further, my jaw set firmly, my gaze sharp and unwavering. The children sensed it too. Charlie paused mid-wail and looked up at me. Lily stopped stomping. Crayons clutched in hand, they felt my shift, my newfound certainty, and even in their chaos, they paused slightly as if recognizing the change in authority. My mind raced strategically instead of emotionally. I began planning silently in seconds what I would do, how I would assert boundaries without chaos, and how I would ensure that Emily's assumptions about me would be challenged in the most undeniable way. I noticed my heartbeat steady despite the overwhelming physical exhaustion and the sensory overload. The smell of chocolate juice and perfume, the squeaking floors, the distant traffic. It all felt like background to the sharp clarity emerging inside me. I realized that all the years of sacrifice, all the unpaid work, all the invisible labor had built a foundation of competence, power, and resilience I had underestimated in myself, and Emily had underestimated entirely. And in that precise moment, 4:05 p.m., I made a silent promise to myself. Never again would I allow my time, energy, or dignity to be treated as expendable. I felt the tiniest smirk tug at my lips, not at Emily, but at the thought of what was coming. The witnesses around me were now unintentional allies, the universe itself, recording my long-overlooked efforts and the injustice being served me in real time. And for those watching who have ever been pushed to the absolute limit, hold on, because the decision to reclaim your dignity is coming, and the next chapter will show exactly how a quiet spark of clarity becomes a blaze of empowerment. It was exactly 4:06 p.m. when I finally made the conscious decision. I had spent decades silently sacrificing my time, my energy, and my dignity for Emily. Now enough was enough. The apartment still smelled faintly of chocolate, spilled juice, and Emily's perfume, but the chaos around me no longer overwhelmed me. Instead, it sharpened my focus. 8 children still running wild, crayons rolling across the beige carpet, spilled juice seeping into every corner, and yet I felt a calm determination settle in. My chest I straightened fully, feeling the strength of my legs, the steadiness of my hands, the clarity of my mind. I looked at Emily adjusting her veil again, her phone in hand, calm and oblivious. "Wilson, seriously, can you just get the kids ready now?" she asked in that same infuriatingly serene tone. I smiled subtly to myself and said quietly under my breath, "Not this time." The children sensed my shift. Immediately, Charlie stopped crying and looked up at me with wide eyes. Lily paused mid-step, clutching a purple crayon as if waiting for instruction. I began issuing calm, firm directions in short, deliberate sentences. "Charlie, come here. Hold my hand, Lily. Put the crayons back in the box. Everyone else, sit on the carpet." Quickly, my voice was steady, authoritative, and surprisingly soothing in its clarity. The first subtle change came as Emily's smirk faltered slightly. She noticed a new firmness in my posture, the unwavering focus of my gaze, the calm decisiveness in my tone. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. I could see the slight tightening in her jaw, the brief narrowing of her eyes. She had never seen me like this before. For the first time in decades, the dynamic between us had shifted ever so slightly, but palpably my hidden advantage. The skills honed over years of relentless caregiving and crisis management now became my secret weapon. I was no longer reactive. I was strategic. I had spent years organizing, mediating, and problem-solving under pressure, and now all that experience converged into this precise moment. My mind calculated the fastest, most efficient way to corral 8 children, clean up spilled juice, organize the toys, and restore order before the photographer arrived. I could feel the power of competence radiating through me. Each child responded instantly. Following my instructions, as if a new authority had emerged, the previously chaotic room began to show glimpses of order. I glanced at Claire filming discreetly and Megan snapping pictures. They could sense the change. 2 witnesses now not only observed but were involuntary participants in this reversal power. I noticed Jamie lowering his phone slightly, his eyebrows raised in surprise at my sudden control. I turned briefly to Emily and said firmly, "I can manage this, but I need you to step back and stop micromanaging." My words were measured, direct, and deliberate. She opened her mouth to object, then stopped. She could sense the authority I had reclaimed, the resolve that radiated from me, and she realized she had underestimated me once again. I felt a thrill of satisfaction, knowing that for the first time in years my voice, my needs, and my dignity were being acknowledged. Even in silence, the subtle smell of spilled juice and chocolate still lingered, but now it smelled like a battlefield I had survived, not one I had been enslaved by. I could see the children beginning to cooperate fully, sitting on the carpet, crayons back in the box, juice cleaned up, toys organized efficiently, as if responding to a conductor orchestrating a symphony of order. My back still ached, my hands sticky, but I felt invincible because I had finally drawn a line. I had finally declared, silently yet unmistakably, that I was no longer a passive participant in Emily's expectations. This was not a confrontation driven by anger, but by calculated assertion, the quiet but unmistakable reclaiming of agency and control. I could feel the weight of decades lifting, replaced by a strategic calm. I glanced at the clock for 10 p.m. and realized I restored order in exactly 4 minutes, while Emily had been distracted, smug, and oblivious to witnesses outside. Claire filming, Megan snapping, Jamie recording, Mrs. Thompson watching from across the street, had all observed the beginning of my transformation. They would remember, and Emily could no longer deny the shift in authority. I allowed myself a small smile and whispered to the children, "Great job, everyone. Now stay seated until the photographer comes." And for those watching who have ever felt invisible or overburdened by family expectations, hold tight, because the next chapter is where the real revelation of power begins, and everything changes in ways Emily never anticipated. By 4:11 p.m., I had fully regained control of the apartment. The children sat obediently on the beige carpet, crayons back in their boxes, chocolate smears mostly wiped up, and juice cleaned from the hardwood floors. I took a deep breath, noticing the faint aroma of cocoa lingering in the air mingled with the subtle perfume of Emily's silk dress and the lingering scent of lemon bars that had gone untouched. The subtle calm I felt radiated from me like a quiet but undeniable signal to everyone in the room. I glanced at Claire, Megan, and Jamie, each holding their phones, recording the aftermath. Their eyes widened as they observed the transformation, the sheer competence radiating from me that they had never noticed before. "Wow! She's managing them all," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible, but filled with shock. Emily froze mid-step, adjusting her veil, and glanced at me, her blue eyes flicking nervously between the children and my composed stance. For the first time, she noticed a change in me. The quiet authority that had emerged seemingly out of nowhere. I caught the flicker of doubt cross her face. Her smirk for moments before vanished, replaced by a thin line of tension around her jaw. The photographer, Mark from Queens, entered the living room cautiously, camera ready. "Is everything under control now?" he asked. Eyebrows raised, I nodded calmly. "Yes, they're ready and seated for the photos," I said firmly, voice steady, tone commanding. The children didn't move out of place. Even as Emily opened her mouth to interrupt, I raised a hand, subtly signaling the room's attention, and said, "Please wait until a photographer directs you." A small but unmistakable assertion that surprised Emily visibly. I could feel the energy shift in the room. The subtle currents of authority and respect had begun to reverse. Emily had assumed dominance over me for years, but now, even in her elegant silk dress and $1,200 shoes, She realized she was no longer in control. I could feel a surge of empowerment, the quiet, long-suppressed confidence that comes from decades of underestimation and unnoticed effort my mind raised strategically. I had spent 35 years mastering organization, caregiving, emotional labor, and crisis management under constant pressure and exploitation. And now all that expertise converged into a precise, unassailable advantage. I could see the first signs of panic in Emily's body language, slight tensing of shoulders, subtle fidgeting of her hands, eyes darting between me and the children as if searching for reassurance she had never needed before. I allowed a faint, calm smile to cross my lips, not at her, but at the silent acknowledgement of my own capability. The children, sensing the shift, responded flawlessly. No squeals, no resistance. They trusted my direction completely, and instinctively I could see the subtle awe in the faces of Claire, Megan, and Jamie as they realized that the person they perceived as overworked, exhausted, and possibly invisible had transformed into the undeniable center of control. The first evidence of my hidden power became visible in tangible ways Emily hadn't accounted for. Meticulous organization of 8 children in less than 5 minutes, chocolate and juice stains, almost fully removed strategic placement of toys and craft supplies to maintain order, while allowing them freedom to remain calm. I realized that all those years of unacknowledged labor had trained me for exactly this moment, and that the silent witnesses were now carriers of proof, recording every action, every calculated move. Emily's voice cracked slightly when she finally spoke. Wilson, how did you? Her words trailed off, the sentence incomplete, because she had no framework for understanding what had just occurred. The subtle shift continued as I directed the children to line up for photos with calm precision. Lily, stand next to Charlie. Hold the tray with juice boxes. Please, everyone else, sit straight, hands on laps. Each command was brief, firm, and effective. Emily's eyes widened further, realizing control she had assumed she held over me was completely gone, and perhaps for the first time in her life. She felt the weight of her assumptions crashing down. Quietly, the faint sound of Mark clicking his camera filled the apartment, the shutters snapping in rapid succession, capturing not just the children, but my unshakable composure amidst what had moment ago been utter chaos. I could see the subtle recognition in the faces of Claire, Megan, and Jamie. They were witnessing not just control, but mastery, decades in the making that Emily had ignored. I felt the first real thrill of empowerment as the subtle reality of the situation dawned on Emily. She had believed she could manipulate and demand endlessly, but she had underestimated my patience, my skill, and my readiness to reclaim authority in a precise, undeniable moment. I glanced at Mrs. Thompson across the street, waving silently from her mailbox, and for a second felt the absurd joy of external acknowledgement. She had no idea what had happened inside, but her quiet observation added a layer of witness to the unfolding transformation. And for those watching who have ever felt invisible, overburdened, or underestimated by family or authority, get ready, because the next chapter reveals the full confirmation of power, the plot twist that changes everything and leaves no doubt in anyone's mind. By 4:15 p.m., the apartment on West 42nd Street had become a theater of undeniable authority. I had taken complete command of room. 8 children lined up perfectly. Crayons returned to their boxes, juice and chocolate cleaned, and toys meticulously arranged. I moved deliberately, each step calm, precise, measured the faint aroma of chocolate, juice, and Emily's silk dress lingered. But now it carried a sense of mastery. Instead of chaos, Claire, Megan, and Jamie's phones were recording every single moment, capturing what had once been perceived as frailty transformed into undeniable competence. Emily's blue eyes widened as she took in the full scope of the scene for the first time. The smirk was gone, replaced by open shock and a faint, unsteady quiver of her lips. Wilson, what? She stammered, voice cracking with a mixture of disbelief and indignation. I held up a hand to pause the photographer, Mark, who was preparing for the family portraits. Hold on, please. I said calmly, everyone stay exactly where you are. My voice carried authority. Emily's eyes darted toward Claire and Megan, who were still filming, realizing that every detail of her previous arrogance, every dismissive remark, every expectation she had set for me alone was now being documented in irrefutable evidence. Jamie lowered his phone slightly, his eyebrows raised in awe as he witnessed complete inversion to control. The children, sensing my unwavering authority, remained perfectly still and obedient. The transformation was total. I had gone from exhausted, invisible caregiver, the undeniable orchestrator of order and mastery, the subtle power I had cultivated over decades. Patience, organization, emotional intelligence, crisis management, manifested fully in this single orchestrated moment. Emily's posture stiffened, the arrogance replaced by a creeping realization of her miscalculation. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I walked calmly toward her, my steps deliberate, my hands steady, the faint tremor of exertion masked by the confidence radiating from my posture. "Emily," I said softly, but each word carried weight. "I can manage, but I am no longer invisible, no longer expendable, no longer at your beck and call for tasks you assume are mine perform." The room fell silent, the faint hum of traffic outside, the squeak of the floorboards under my careful steps. Even the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel seemed to pause as my words settled like stones into the consciousness of every witness. Emily's face turned pale. She had underestimated me for years. Assuming my compliance and invisibility, she now realized the scale of her misjudgment and the magnitude of my capability. I gestured toward the children, who were perfectly composed, and said, firmly, "The photos will proceed smoothly, but only because of proper planning, structure, and respect for everyone involved." Claire whispered under her breath. She's incredible." Megan nodded, eyes wide. Snapping more photos, Jamie recorded silently. Capture my full transformation. Photographer Mark glanced at Emily and then at me, recognizing instantly the authority I now held. "Wow, that's amazing," he muttered quietly. Emily's lips parted, but no words emerged. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightening of her jaw, the flicker of shame crossing her face as she fully grasped her error. Every camera recorded not just my competence, but the undeniable proof that Emily's assumptions had been completely overturned. The subtle thrill of empowerment coursed through me. Decades of overlooked labor, unpaid efforts, and unacknowledged sacrifices had finally been validated. The children's compliance, the witnesses' astonishment, and the documentation of every moment made the reversal irrefutable. I walked to the center of the room, stood tall, and allowed a small, controlled smile to form on my lips, not from triumph over Emily, but from the satisfaction of reclaiming decades of hidden authority. The universe itself seemed to acknowledge the moment. Claire whispered again, She's unstoppable." Emily's voice finally found its way out, trembling. I didn't realize." I nodded calmly, gaze unwavering. "You didn't, Emily, but now it's clear." The subtle shift was complete. The power dynamic had flipped irrevocably, permanently. The witnesses, now fully aware of the transformation, recorded every reaction, every moment of realization, every hint of humiliation as Emily slowly absorbed the totality of the change. The room, once a scene of overwhelming chaos, now stood as a testament to the hidden potential in overlooked patience, diligence, and competence. I took a deep breath, feeling the faint scent of chocolate and juice linger as a reminder of the battle just fought, and one I had not only regained control, but I had demonstrated irrefutably that my worth, my skill, and my dignity could no longer be ignored. And for those watching who have ever been underestimated or taken for granted, brace yourself, because the next chapter shows justice unfolding in real time and the ripple effect of this reversal of power. It was exactly 4:18 p.m. when the first tangible effect of the shift in power began to ripple through Emily's apartment. The children remained perfectly still, lined up like tiny sentinels under my calm supervision. I could feel the satisfaction and control pulsing through me as Claire, Megan, and Jamie continued recording, capturing every subtle expression, every tiny flinch of Emily's disbelief. The faint scent of chocolate, juice, and Emily's perfume lingered in the air, but now carried the weight of authority and reclaimed dignity. The first action of justice came when Emily realized she had no leverage over the situation. "Wilson, I guess I should," she started, voice trembling. I held up a hand calmly, signaling her to stop, and said firmly, "No explanations are needed. Emily, this is about recognition of effort, fairness, and respect." Her shoulders sagged slightly, the first visible concession of accountability. The subtle tension in the room shifted further as the children remained attentive, quietly cooperative, reinforcing my authority for all to see. I glanced at Claire, filming discreetly, Megan snapping photos, and Jamie recording. They all exchanged looks of astonishment, silent witnesses to the reversal of a long-standing injustice. I began issuing clear, structured tasks to the children. Lily, pass the juice boxes to the table. Charlie, Make sure everyone's shoes are on. Every command executed flawlessly under my calm but authoritative guidance. I noticed Emily's lips tighten as she watched her carefully laid plans crumble before her eyes. The photographer, Mark, stepped closer, camera ready, and whispered, "She's handling it like a pro." I nodded without looking at him, maintaining focus on the children and subtly reinforcing the authority. I now held the first measure of real justice was external and public. Claire whispered, "This isn't going to go viral if you post it." I smiled faintly, understanding that the documentation itself was an undeniable accountability measure. Emily's phone buzzed with notifications. She glanced at it briefly and frowned. The photos and videos already circulating among friends and family, showing the reality of her arrogance and my composure, began to spread quietly but effectively across social media. The realization began to dawn on her that not only was she losing control in that moment, but her reputation was quietly being corrected in real time. I could feel a subtle energy of empowerment radiating through the room. Each witness, each camera, each recording was a reinforcement of justice, the first tangible step in rectifying years of unacknowledged labor. An invisible effort. Emily's voice, small and hesitant, finally broke the silence. I didn't realize you," I interrupted calmly. "Exactly, Emily. Now it's seen. It's documented. And it's acknowledged." The first ripple humiliation crossed her face, subtle but unmistakable. Her posture, once upright and smug, now carried tension and self-awareness. She had been confronted with evidence she could neither ignore nor manipulate. The children, meanwhile, remained perfectly engaged, completing tasks without fuss. Their cooperation underscored my authority and the fact that the system of chaos she had relied upon was no longer functional. I directed Charlie and Lily to set the table for photos. "Everyone else, sit straight." Hands on laps, their flawless execution further reinforced my regained dignity and control. Claire whispered again, "I've never seen anyone take charge like this." Megan nodded, eyes wide with admiration. Jamie kept filming silently, capturing the perfect documentation of Emily's first tangible recognition of her misjudgment. The apartment, once a chaotic battlefield, had shifted into a controlled environment of respect, attention, and fairness. The subtle smell of chocolate juice and perfume lingered, but now acted as a reminder of the injustices that had been corrected in real time. The first wave of public justice was not only visible, but undeniable. Emily had been forced to witness, in front of every witness, her error and the tangible results of her assumptions. I felt a quiet thrill of satisfaction, knowing that this initial stage of justice had not required confrontation, shouting, or revenge, only calm, strategic assertion of skill, authority, and composure. The clock read 4:22 p.m. The first measurable phase of justice had been enacted in 4 minutes. Emily's shoulders slumped slightly more. Lips pursed, her eyes flicked to recording devices. Claire, Megan, Jamie, Mark. And for the first time, she truly understood the depth of her miscalculation. And for anyone watching who has ever been dismissed, overlooked, or taken for granted, stay with me, because the next chapter will show the full impact, the culmination of justice and public acknowledgement that will leave no doubt in anyone's mind. By 4:30 p.m., the full impact of the reversal had settled over Emily's apartment. The children were perfectly composed, the beige carpet spotless. Crayons and toys returned to their designated spots, and juice completely clean from the hardwood floor. The subtle aroma of chocolate and spilled juice lingered, now a reminder of the chaos that had been transformed into order. I stood tall, my spine straight, hands clean despite the earlier mess, eyes sharp and focused. Claire, Megan, and Jamie were still recording, capturing every moment of Emily's shocked realization. Her $1,200 silk dress seemed suddenly out of place amidst the now perfectly controlled chaos. The first real sign of full justice came when Emily's phone buzzed with notifications from friends, relatives, and even strangers who had seen snippets of the videos and photos. Comments poured in acknowledging the absurdity of her expectations and praising my competence. "Wilson is amazing managing all those kids. I can't believe Emily expected this alone." Finally, someone gets recognized for their hard work. Emily's face turned pale, lips pressed into a thin line, shoulders slumping visibly. She looked at me, her blue eyes wide with disbelief. Her voice caught somewhere between indignation and shame. "Wilson, I never realized." I gave a calm nod, each movement deliberate. "Now it's visible, Emily. Everyone has seen it. Everything you assumed about me has been challenged publicly. The children responded flawlessly to my instructions, sitting straight, hands on laps, maintaining composure like trained little soldiers. Their obedience underscore my authority and reinforce the narrative for every witness present. I noticed Mrs. Thompson still peering from across the street, a faint nod acknowledging what had unfolded quietly from her vantage point. The subtle external validation made the reversal of power undeniable. The photographer, Mark, stepped forward, snapping rapid-fire images of the children and me in perfect alignment. Capturing Emily's stunned expression for posterity, Claire whispered under her breath, "This is going to circulate everywhere. People will see exactly what happened." Megan nodded. Snapping more photos, Jamie recorded silently, ensuring that the sequence of events, my competence, and Emily's shock were fully documented. Emily, fully aware of the evidence now, attempted to regain composure but failed. Her shoulders tense, jaw set, and every subtle twitch betrayed her internal acknowledgement of miscalculation. Her entitlement had evaporated under the weight of public witness. The final measure of justice arrived when one of Emily's friends, Sarah, who had been recording discreetly earlier, posted a short clip online within minutes. Comments from extended family and friends began streaming in, acknowledging the sheer audacity of Emily's expectations and praising my authority, calmness, and problem-solving prowess. The combination of witnesses in the room, recordings, and social media ensured the full magnitude of her misjudgment was visible to all. She could no longer manipulate the narrative, nor could she deny the skill, patience, and authority I had exercised. The children, still perfectly composed, were a living testament to my competence. The chaos that Emily had expected me to manage alone now served as undeniable evidence of my capability and her oversight. Every subtle detail, from chocolate-stained sleeves to juice-slick floors, had been transformed into markers of triumph. The apartment, once a battleground of invisible labor and ignored effort, had become a stage where authority, fairness, and recognition were fully restored. The subtle smells, the polished surfaces, the calm children, and the stunned witnesses all reinforced the systemic shift. Emily had underestimated me, and the outcome was now undeniable. She attempted one last word, voice trembling. I suppose maybe. I shook my head gently, maintaining calm control. No more assumptions, Emily. Everyone saw the truth today, the subtle tension, the witness's silent affirmation, and the documentation of the events ensured the full impact of justice had been realized by 4:38 p.m. Every observer, every recording, every photograph confirmed the reversal. The humiliation, the misjudgment, and the arrogance were now fully visible to all. Emily's authority had evaporated, replaced by recognition of my competence, patience, and strategic mastery. I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing this was systemic. The reversal of expectations, the visibility of effort, the acknowledgement of my dignity. It could not be undone and would be remembered long after the children were safely photographed. And for anyone watching who has ever been overlooked, burdened, or underestimated, brace yourself, because the next and final chapter shows a lasting transformation, reflection, and lessons learned from reclaiming respect and justice. It was 4:45 p.m. when the last traces of chaos were fully resolved. The children were smiling, crayons and toys back in their designated spots, juice and chocolate stains cleaned, and the apartment smelling faintly of lemon bars, chocolate, and faint perfume, but now carrying the calm scent of order and achievement. I stood in the center of Emily's living room, taking in the scene that had unfolded over the last hour. Decades of invisible labor, underappreciated effort, and overlooked competence had been recognized at last. The subtle smiles of the children, the wide eyes of Claire, Megan, and Jamie, and even the faint nod from Mrs. Thompson across the street reminded me that the quiet assertion of dignity, patience, and skill had lasting impact. I reflected on the journey that had led to this moment, decades of sacrifice, countless unpaid hours, emotional labor that no one noticed, trips from Boston to New York, library shifts skipped, and even $73.45 saved from allowance at age 12 to buy a gift for Emily. All of it had culminated in this precise, undeniable moment of recognition and empowerment. The subtle thrill of achievement coursed through me, knowing that I had reclaimed authority without losing my dignity or calm. I glanced at Emily, who now stood quietly, her smirk gone, shoulders slumped, fully aware of her misjudgment. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. She had been forced to witness the value of my labor, patience, and intelligence in a tangible, undeniable way. The children, my silent allies, continue to cooperate perfectly. Their trust in my guidance reflecting the unspoken acknowledgement of my competence, I realize that true empowerment comes not from revenge or confrontation, but from calm, strategic assertion of skills, patience, and self-worth, the subtle lessons of decades, from childhood to adulthood, had finally borne fruit. And for anyone who has ever felt invisible or taken for granted, this story serves as proof that quiet strength, competence, and dignity can reverse even long-standing patterns of injustice. I thought about the countless times I've been overlooked, the subtle dismissals, the assumptions of invisibility and incapability, and now all of those moments were transformed into a foundation for confidence, empowerment, and self-recognition. I smiled softly, glancing at the children, the witnesses, and the recordings quietly documenting every moment. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or burdened by family expectations, remember this: your patience, skill, and perseverance matter. I spoke directly to the audience, my voice calm yet filled with conviction. Your effort is seen even if not immediately acknowledged, and sometimes recognition comes in ways you least expect. I took a breath, letting the faint aromas, the laughter of the children, and the calm room settle around me. If this story resonates with you, leave a comment sharing your experience. Let's build a community that acknowledges effort and dignity. I added gently. Subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell to witness more stories of justice, empowerment, and transformation. I pause, letting the word sink before adding, share this story with someone who needs to see that reclaiming your worth is possible no matter how overlooked or underestimated you feel. The subtle hum of the city outside, the quiet presence of witnesses, and the faint smell of chocolate and perfume reminded me that small acts of courage, patience, and skill can ripple outward, influencing not just your immediate environment, but the perceptions, attitudes, and awareness of everyone observing. I looked at Emily once more, who now avoided my gaze, acknowledging silently what had been lost and what had been revealed. I smiled calmly and concluded, never allow your value to be dismissed. Never let invisible labor go unrecognized, and always remember, quiet strength backed by skill and dignity can transform even the most entrenched injustices. And for everyone watching, take a moment to reflect on your own life, your own boundaries, and the ways you deserve recognition, because empowerment begins with reclaiming your own agency and honoring your worth.